The biggest storyline around the defensive side of the ball for the 2025 NFL Scouting Combine revolves around cornerback Travis Hunter out of Colorado and why he needs to set the tone with explosive testing. We'll talk about this and more coming up next.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Locked On family? Welcome back to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, your daily podcast covering your favorite draft prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your boy, Damian Parson. I'm an offensive draft analyst over with Bleacher Report, and that's my guy, Keith Sanchez. He is the director of scouting with the Draft Network and 2019 national champion with those LSU Tigers. Guys, thank you for tapping in with us each and every day and being our everydayers, making us your first listen this morning. Guys, we have a fun show to break down. Defensive combine storylines to watch for, defensive prospects with the most on the line, and we're going to talk about some sleeper defensive prospects that you need to watch at the NFL Scouting Combine this week. Keith, let's get into it. My biggest storyline surrounds the Heisman winner from the 2024 college football season, Mr. Wide Receiver, cornerback, athlete himself, Travis Hunter. And I think this is an opportunity. We talked about this with my storyline with the offensive side was I don't want the quarterbacks. Nobody should duck the smoke. When I look at Travis Hunter, come out here and set the tone, right? We all have an imagination, right? We imagine that you're a 4.3 athlete. We imagine that you're going to jump 40 inches. We see the athleticism on tape, and we're not going to dispute that. But go out here and stamp that. You know what I mean? I'm not saying you got to run a 4.2 something. I'm just saying go out here and compete and showcase why you are viewed as, for some people, a generational talent. Keith, go out here and test well, run well, jump well, do all the things because he's supposed to be here at the combine as a DB. Mm-hmm. He's not listed as a wide receiver. He's listed as a cornerback, as a defensive back. I want to see the field drills, but I want to see the athletic testing from him just overall. Just put a number on the sheet so we know exactly what we're working with from an NFL team standpoint. I think the combine is going to be huge for him if he decides to test. And for a guy that's played over 150 snaps a game or whatever it was in college each game, he's a competitor. I want to see him compete.
Yeah, no, I don't think you can talk about the defensive side of the football, especially with Travis Hunter declaring that he, will work out as a corner without talking about Travis Hunter, right? Like he is the storyline, right? This is the first time, not the first time, right? Because people gonna bring up the Champ Baileys and the Charles Woodsons, right? But to this level, yes, like no other guys would like, you still knew Charles Woodson played DB. You still knew Champ Bailey played DB, right? Like Travis Hunter is telling us now that he's going to work out at DB, but I wonder what is he going to do, right? Like that's the question. 40 time. And like what is he going to run? Broad jump. What is he going to jump? Vertical. What is he going to jump? Like on field drills. Like do we get to see like his technique and things like that? Because we know that at Colorado he played a lot of zone, right? But what does he do now, right? Like how's his footwork, things like that. We know he could track the football down the field, so I'm not worried about that part. But it's just so many questions because as much as it's weird because we've seen a lot of Travis Hunter play football, but I think when you start to isolate wide receiver or corner, right, and then you look at corner and then you say, okay, now grade him as a corner, right? I think if you're thinking about building a football team, it's like, oh, it's really cool that he plays two positions, but I think if you start to look at him and isolate him at one position, now you can start to compare and contrast what are his skill sets compared to an actual cornerback and not the gray area because he plays wide receiver also. So I don't think you could talk about this DP without talking about Travis Hunter. I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be exciting to see. But also, is he like? I have a question. Do you think he's a prospect where there's no bar that he can reach? Meaning that if he runs a 4.4, I believe that some people will complain that wasn't fast enough. If he runs a 4.3, some people are going to say he could have ran a 4.2, right? And lo and behold, he runs like a 4.49, right? Then some people are going to talk about him not being in the top 10, top 15 anymore. I could just see that because we noticed that, with some of these prospects, it's not even about the field stuff. It gets into that word, DP, and always talk about who do I like, right? Like
Yeah.
and it has nothing. And when I say like, it's not about the football stuff. I don't like Travis Hunter. Why? Because it has nothing to do with football stuff. Why you don't like him? So people are going to use those type of tests to verify why they don't like him. And it's like, okay,
100%. No, yeah, I think the bar question is a very good one, because like you said, it's certain prospects is like no matter what you do, it's like darn if you do, darn if you don't. Like it doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? Like, because if you like, because I remember, was it last year? Granted, he lost the bet for me. It was Troy Franklin. I picked him to win the 40-yard dash.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was at the combine. You pick Xavier Worthy, I lost. So you know what I mean? I was looking at Troy like, you let me down, big fella. But he ran a 4.41, and it's like you kind of sometimes you lose sense of, man, 4.41 is still blazing fast.
Yeah,
like, you know
that's
what I mean? It's like, bro, he's still running past guys who are 4.45. If he get the step on you, you might not catch him. He's still got that type of speed. So if he hits a 4.4 flat, yeah, it will be somebody like, man, I thought he was a 4.35 guy, man. I'm a little disappointed in that time. It was like, why? It's a 4.4 flat. Like he's still rolling. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, but if he hits a 4.38, it's like, oh man, I thought he was gonna be like the way he played on tape. I thought he was a 4.28 guy. It was like, all right, come on. So I don't think if he jumps 38, people are like, man, I don't know, man. When he got that interception, I swear he had a 42-inch vert.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you guys have set the expectations in your own mind without ever seeing these guys train. You never seen a number hit the social media timelines of, man. I remember at the combine 2 years ago when I, talking to people close to the coast. I'm like, they're like, yeah, we watched Anthony Richardson train. Like he hit 4.38. You know what I mean? That he did the combine. He did the combine. He did 4.41, and that was because he was moving side to side. But like hearing that, okay, he hit sub 4.4. Okay, that kind of tracks. You look at the Utah game when he ran for 65 for that touchdown. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. You know what I mean? So I don't think I don't think Travis, I want him to compete, but I don't think there's anything he can do because I'm gonna tell you what's also gonna kick in, Keith. The people who hate him because Ashton Jeanty didn't win the Heisman. They're legit. There's a crowd of people that dislike Travis Hunter simply because they feel like Ashton Jeanty was the better player. I just want to see him go out there, compete, showcase what he can do testing wise. And like you said, the big question is going to be like, how fluid are your hips? Like how quick are your feet in doing man coverage drills? Because we always talk about it, when you play both sides of the ball full time in college, you never really got a chance to develop at either one. Like
no, you didn't, because
playing.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of time that's allotted to practice, right? So if you play wide receiver and corner, you can't have two practices, right? Like you still have to fit that inside of that bucket. So you got to think about it. If you have a practice script and, most practices start off with like an indie period, right? So you're working on the individual drills of your specific position. What do I do? Do I split? Like if we get 20 minutes for indie period at the start of practice, do I do 10 minutes at wide receiver, 10 minutes at corner? Do I do all at wide receiver, all at corner? Do I alternate days, right? Either way, it's split though, right? It's split or you're not working on one or the other. And so I agree with you. It's like, okay, how refined and detailed is he as a prospect at a specific position, right? And that's what we get to see.
And I think that's going to be that's why I'm I look at it from a glass half full situation with him, because I'm like, all right, if he plays full-time corner in the NFL, you're going to get a lot of opportunities to go from, okay, we just got off the field, I don't have to tighten my chin strap or keep it tightened to run back on the field for offense. I get to go to the bench, sit with my DC, sit with my cornerbacks coach. What did I mess up on against Justin Jefferson on that rep? Like, what did I do wrong? How did he beat me here? You get to look at it on I think they got the Microsoft Surface tablets. You get to do that stuff. Like every other cornerback in the NFL, rather than in college, you couldn't do that because you immediately were getting ready to go back on the field on offense because you got to be the wide receiver one for Colorado and Shedeur Sanders. So I think that's why I'm so glass half full on him, because I feel like that natural, just with reps, and now you get to be trained and taught the cornerback position. Not saying that Coach Prime didn't do that, but they needed you to do way more. Now we could take some of that stuff off your plate, and you can actually play cornerback full time and really develop at the position. Off season, you're playing corner. If your footwork and your press man coverage is not where it needs to be, that's one area of improvement that you need to work on.
Yep, I agree with DP. Let's do this, man. Let's transition into talking about the defensive prospects with the most on the line. We just gave you an entire Travis Hunter rundown. Right now, we're going to talk about some other guys, right, that have a lot on the line, whether that's edge rushers, safeties, corners, linebackers. We're going to talk about those guys that can make themselves some money or they can lose a whole lot of money. We're going to talk about that coming up next.
2025 NFL Draft defensive prospects with the most on the line. Keith, I'm going back to the defensive backs. I'm going back to corner. I'm going to our guy out of Oregon now. He was Washington last year. I almost got those flipped. Jabbar Muhammad, man. And I remember watching him at Washington, and I had a high second-round grade. I was like, Jabbar needs to enter the 2024 NFL Draft today. Like, his tape was so good. And didn't matter if it was a big receiver, fast receiver, small receiver, because remember his matchups against Troy Franklin. I think I think they played each other twice that year in 2023. I think he gave up one to two catches in those two games. Like, it was at one point, Bo Nix didn't even target him again after the first pass breakup in the championship game. Bo said, screw it, I'm not looking his direction no more. And his tape was good, but he's going to come in undersized. I think the testing for him is going to be paramount, Keith. Mm-hmm. I don't think this is a guy that can run 4.55. Like, I don't think he can get away with that and just rest on his laurels. I think he has to go out there and he's got to get as close to 4.4 as possible. Because if not, people are going to say, listen, we can't play you in man coverage on the outside. You're too small, and we're going to have to put you inside as a nickel.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's what's going to happen to him. I like Jabbar Muhammad a lot, DP, and
me too.
Haven't released my DB rankings as far as corners. But don't be surprised, Locked On Family, if you see CB2 for me. I feel like okay, Travis Hunter playing corner, fine. You insert Travis Hunter when need be, right? Like, it's difficult. But I'm talking Will Johnson. I'm talking about those guys that we usually see, right? The Benjamin Morrisons, the Azariah Thomases, those guys like that. Like, I think that I put him over them. I like Jabbar that much. I think Jabbar can play football. He has the footwork, closing speed, explosiveness, planting drive.
Instincts.
Yeah. He has it all. So I agree with you with that being a defensive prospect with the most on the line. It's funny you went corner. You went corner DP. Because I was going to look at those defensive backs also, right? In past, just Jabbar Muhammad, all of those guys, right? You're talking about Sebastian Castro. You're talking about Maxwell Harrison. You're talking about Dorian Strong. I just mentioned Azariah Thomas, Trey Amos. And the reason is, DP, is because those guys can try to elevate themselves up 20, 30 spots with good testing, or they can fall back, right? Like you're talking Quincy Riley, another guy from Louisville to throw in there, to where you see that the film is good football players, but they're stuck in this like not love kind of category. And when you like somebody, you can take them in the second, third, or fourth round. When you love them, you're going to get them in the first round. And I think some of those defensive backs, those safeties, they have to perform at a high level. Guys like Kevin Winston, I'm not sure if they're going to be back from injury. I'm pretty sure Siobhan Rebel is not testing at all, right? Like, just towards ACL, not testing at all. Yeah, and so Kevin Winston would be another guy. Malachi Starks, DP, is a big name. Somebody, a guy that's slowly losing steam for various amounts of reasons. You're just not hearing the same buzz that you heard about him entering the football season. So is he a guy that's falling down boards into the second round, right? He's a football player that I thought about, and I said he reminds me a lot. Because remember I told you I kind of like the Minkah Fitzpatrick situation, but I went back and watched some old Minkah, and I'm like, it's not Minkah. But how I did fall on was Malik Hooker, and I think we had that conversation. And I think he's more Malik Hooker than Minkah.
And I agree with you on the stock not being where it once was, because this past season in Georgia, he was playing more nickel and stuff this year because of the fact they didn't have the defensive back firepower at corner that they typically had. We watched like Chris Smith and all the different guys that have come through. They had all these different interchangeable pieces where he could just play on the roof. He could just be the free safety and showcase his strengths. I don't think this, like, unlike a Brian Branch and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and some of these other like nickel / hybrid safeties, guys that can walk down the nickel and play high level like nickel corner. I don't really see that with Malachi. I'm sorry. I think he's functional in that range. I think he's much better as the last line of defense with his range, his instincts, and his ball skills. And I think Georgia, not because of anything on his own, I just think that he just kind of put in a very tough situation. Keith, I'm gonna stick with safety real quick before we transition into some other position. Nick Imanwori out of South Carolina, 6'3", 225. Like, people are like, the buzz is expecting him to test like a freak athlete. Oh yeah, he goes out here and tests well.
I didn't know that because maybe I don't feel like I seen that on film. But if he does, that would be really good for him.
If he tests well, like, compared to what we just talked about with Malachi, right? Nick is kind of more that strong safety, too high box guy that can be very fluid, a potential tight end matchup guy as well. He has good ball skills. He takes the ball away. You know, you can blitz him. He can run, defend, everything like that. If he comes out and busts a 4.5 flat, jumps 40 inches in the vert, 10.7 in the broad, and he doesn't, and on the field drills, his hip fluidity is better because he's got that, like, I always talk about that muscular frame, that muscular build, and then that body composition that kind of creates some tightness in the hips and stuff like that. If he can come out here and test well and showcase he's more fluid than people expect him to be, yeah, like, this is going to help him out a lot. And dare I say, he might be the first safety off the board if he kills the combine, because he's going to come in, like, the body type wise, he's going to look completely different than Malachi. Malachi's what, 5'10", $190 maybe? Like, I don't think he's close to it. $185, maybe $180. This dude coming in at 6. If he checks in at 6'3", 227, busts a 4.5 flat, jumps well, moves well. It's like, hey, some coach in the stands, Keith, with the meme of Bill Belichick with the binoculars looking down at the field. Like, somebody's going to grab their binoculars, peep game, like, hey man, like, this guy might be the one for us. Like, we in the division with some tight ends, tired of that stuff. Like, we need to fix some things. He might be the answer to our problems. And I think that's a guy that has a lot riding on this, because if he doesn't test well, Keith, then it's like, okay, well, maybe you're just a traditional old box safety. And if you're just a traditional old box safety, it's the whole value aspect. Do we value you as a high second round, or do we say, we can get one of you in the 4th, 5th round?
Right. Yep. No, I think that's exactly what it's going to be. Another guy I throw into that bucket too is Xavier Watts, right? Some kind of very same situation of like, okay, what are you going to run? What is the athletic testing? What is the movement skills for those guys? But DP, obviously we have to talk about the edge rushers, right? Like, what is Nick Scouting going to run? Like, being 290 pounds, what is he going to come and run? Shamar Stewart, a lot of buzz around him, right? I think if he runs a 4.5, 4.6, right, the buzz continues. If he runs a 4.9 at 280, I can guarantee you the buzz is probably going
that hoop drill, Keith.
Yeah,
that's going to be big for him.
Yeah, just seeing his bend and things like that, because there's so many different edge rush kind of body types, right? And we talked about this, the JT Tuimamalus, the Jack Sawyers. Like, what are their movement skills? Do people look at the athletic test and feel like, hey, there's actually more to pull out of some of these guys? And Michael Williams, DP, for an edge rusher, his athletic testing is going to be important, because if he comes in there at 265, somewhere around there, and runs a 4.5, you can guarantee you might want to lock him up for a top 10 pick, right? He's not falling in any more mock drafts, because people are gonna buy into what he could be. But DP, let's talk
real
about
quick. I want to ask you real quick. Abdul Carter, does Abdul have that? He's projected to be the best player in the draft at this point after his playoff run. Does he need to do anything, in your opinion?
If he wants to, fine. But for me, it doesn't matter.
If you're his agent, what are you telling him, Keith?
I'm telling him, I'll probably tell him just wait for pro day, to be completely honest. I tell him wait for pro day. Yeah, when it's in a controlled environment, you choose if you want to run the 40 or not. And if you run a 4.55, 4.65, if like, it's just kind of like, I'm putting the pressure back on the owners and the GM. I'm saying, listen, if you want to not draft Abdul Carter because he runs a 4.6 at defensive end, then that's completely on you, right? I'm putting the pressure back on them and making them rethink the situation. But DP, let's talk about some sleeper guys. Yes, guys nobody are talking about, the sleeper defensive prospects to watch who can potentially perform really well, that you will watch their movement skills and be like, hold on, who is that guy? We're going to talk about those guys coming up next.
Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and everyday. Shot for being our every day. So sleeper defensive prospects that you need to watch in Indianapolis at the NFL Scouting Combine. Keith, I look to the linebacker situation, and I'm going to go to Rutgers linebacker Tyreen Powell. He was supposed to be in Mobile, didn't make the trip and everything. But this was a guy, if you remember when I was at the Draft Network, I talked about him in the summer. I was like, this kid's 6'5", he's 250, he's got range. I think he might have been converted from safety, if I remember correctly. But like, he played quarterback in high school. He did a lot of different things, and he's a good athlete at that size. And when you think about having a 6'5" off-ball backer that can blitz, he's patient, knows how to use his wingspan to separate himself from climbing interior offensive linemen. And you're talking about being able to, especially with these so much athletic quarterbacks at the NFL level, the Josh Allens, the Lamar Jacksons, dealing with a Joe Burrow. People won't call him a dual threat, but he's athletic. Mahomes and his creativity, athleticism, that they can break, contain, create second reaction opportunities. I think Tyreen Powell being able to just go out here, and it's crazy because when you look at the lineups, you see the guys like standing in a group, standing by each other. He's going to make some of the more well-known linebackers, the Barrett Carters and some of these other guys who might be 6'1", he's going to make them look a lot smaller because that height and that body type. I think for him, just going out there and testing well and then showcasing how like his ability to drop off in coverage and flip and turn his hips is going to be paramount and pivotal for him, because I think this is a round 3, round 4 guy that could potentially end up being a year 1 starter in the right defensive scheme.
Yeah, DP, it's funny you went linebackers because I think it's so easy to glance over this class, but there's a lot of talented linebackers in this class, and it's something that we've been talking about. And when you talk about a setting like the NFL Combine, right, where it's based off athletic measurements, this probably going to be one of the better testing linebacker class. So you talk about sleeper defensive prospects to talk about. Jahad Campbell, right? We just talked about him in my mock draft on yesterday's show. Carson Schlesinger, right? Like, what does he perform? And I think if he's able to test, I think he was injured for the Senior Bowl. Don't quote me on that. I know that he was slated to go, and then he wound up not going. So I want to see if he, if he comes to the combine and performs. Jeffrey Boss out of Oregon, right? A guy that I know you like, that can just flat out run. Nick Martin, a guy that can flat out slide, right? Shamar James, the linebacker out of Florida. I gave him a high 3rd round grade. This guy, I like him. Football. Chris Paul Jr. out of Ole Miss, a fast flow, fluid, explosive football player. And then, like you said, you still got the Barrett Carters, the Cody Lindenbergs, the Danny Stutmans. It's a lot of linebackers, DP, in this linebacker class that I think will surprise people when it comes down to being sleeper players, right? Like guys that nobody's talking about, but you're drafting, I think, could be high-end starters for your NFL franchise, because those guys check the boxes of athleticism, explosiveness, the instincts part, and then also they can play multiple positions because they have the size to do it. They're not 5'11", 215. These are guys that are 6'1"-ish, 235 pounds that can play linebacker.
Keep an eye, Keith, on Ohio State linebacker Cody Simon. Cody can ball, man. He can ball. Like he had a good playoff run that kind of went under the radar. He did a good playoff run, man, especially the start of the first 2 games. He had like 3 or 4 sacks, and he's playing off-ball backer. And I think when you look at this past season in the NFL, it felt like teams were more willing to run the ball than years prior. And if you're dealing with the run game, I've been it's crazy because history repeats itself. Remember back when we were growing up, there was the starter jackets, right? The NFL, NBA starter jackets. And then over the last, maybe 2 years, the starter jackets start coming back, right? You know what I mean? It was the high top fade before we were born. And then the high top fades came back. History just repeats itself. And the way that we transition to a pass happy league, I'm not saying that we're going to get away from that. It's going to be like the 2000s of Jamal Lewis running for 2,000, 2,200 yards, whatever it was. I'm saying we're going to get back to that. But I do expect teams to be more balanced going forward, because these front sevens are smaller than they ever have been. You got safeties playing linebacker at 220, 215, 225. And it's like, man, if I take my 315-pound guard and get dual block and climb to get you, that's easy money. We can kick off of that. No, we off to the races, man. I think these linebackers, people like I said, I think we talked about it months ago, multiple times. People aren't watching these guys. The kid that Eugene Asante from Auburn, he had a solid week. You know, one of the guys who did fairly well in the one-on-one running back, linebacker pass catching drills. He covered pretty well out there. So I think this is a guy that absolutely we got to look at, just this linebacker group overall, man. And I think these guys are gonna make themselves some money and really help themselves out a lot. But Keith, I think it feels like he shouldn't be. But Trey Amos out of the Ole Miss, the cornerback, like it feels like he's a sleeper at this point. Dude's tape is good. I was surprised he transferred from. Well, maybe I should be surprised. I think he transferred after Nick Saban retired, so it might have been one of those departures after Saban retired. But I remember when they played Georgia in the SEC championship game, and he was jamming the life of every receiver that stepped to the line of scrimmage. This is a big, physical. I think he's like 6'1", maybe 200 pounds. He's physical. He can run. I think putting out a good 40 time and different things like that. I just, man, listen, the DB class, I know it's not as like, it's not like last year where we had, you know, Kool-Aid, Terrion, Quinyon, Cooper DeJean. It's not like in this rake straw. I think all 5 of those guys were gone off the board before mid-second round. It's not like that, but there's still a good group of guys that I think can come in and be impact starters in the right scheme on the right defense, man. I think the DBs especially have a lot to prove, and there's a lot of sleepers in that cornerback room, man. Like I said, you talk about Sebastian Castro, and the one other guy, Keith, that I like out of North Carolina, Elijah Huzzy. He was down at the Shrine Bowl. Guy that I think can play nickel and play outside. He's like 5'10", 190. Guy can cover. He's tough. He's gritty. Yeah, man. I think Brent Grimes was maybe a little bit shorter. I can't remember, but he kind of reminded me of Brent Grimes a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, DP, and I'm gonna wrap this up with just 2 more of my guys real quick. Now I feel like I'm the only guy that pounds the tables for these guys. Barron Sorrell, right, the edge rusher from Texas.
Yes.
Very interested to see what he can do, right? And then Braden Swinson, a guy that's been totally off people's radar that can flat out play football. This guy can ball. I'm telling you, he can play football. And then the last guy, RJ Oben. I'm sorry. RJ Oben was left off of the combine list, DP.
That is right. That's a snub. That's a snub, man.
That's a combine snub, but he was a guy I was going through the edge rushers that I was really excited for, but definitely a snub. And I don't understand how he's invited to the Senior Bowl, but not invited to the combine. But yeah, those 2 guys definitely for sure, DP. Barron Sorrell, Braden Swinson, those 2 edge rushers are definitely guys. And then you could throw in the other edge rusher from LSU, who I think is just a tough, gritty guy. He reminds me of those guys that go to the Chiefs, right? Where they kind of like versatile. Savion Jones, just another multiple.
Had a good Senior Bowl.
Yeah, had a really good Senior Bowl and a really good showcase. A guy that there wasn't a lot of buzz around him, and see what he's going to be able to do at the NFL Combine. But DP, that wraps up another episode, man, of the Locked On NFL Draft. I want to end this podcast off by saying shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day. Every listener is greatly appreciated here. I am Keith Sanchez. You can find me on X at the Talent Code. There right there's my guy, my co-host, Mr. Damian Parson. You can find him on X at DP_NFL. And like we like to say, man, y'all come talk to us because we like to talk back.
Go subscribe and follow for free on YouTube wherever you listen to podcasts to get the latest episode as soon as it is available. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. Come and join the conversation again tomorrow on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.